Hi, Alan Stratton from Woodturning. Through the years in woodturning, I've heard many different specifications for baby rattles. They say it has to be this size, has to be this size, the handle must be such. Well, to cut to the chase, there are now certain government regulations that apply to specifically to baby rattles. It's in section 1510 or thereabouts. One specification in there is they specify a test fixture. This one is for small parts. I don't worry about this too much because I'm not making baby stuff with small parts, but in this case the test is the part cannot fit entirely inside of this fixture, which has a slanted bottom for some reason. But anyway, that's what they specify. More specifically is a fixture in section 1510.4, and in this case any part of a baby rattle must not pass completely through to the other side. So in this case with this, it won't even go in, so not a problem, but in many cases the handles would be a problem and would fail the test. I'll show you some examples of that later. But for this project I wanted to use my LED laser to do an inscription on the handle of the rattle. Well, LED lasers have a limited, at least mine, has a limited focal length, which means that if there's a big bulb over here, but by the time the laser beam hits here, it's not focused anymore and does a really bad job. So I wanted to design a rattle that I could burn the inscription on, and it has additional plus in that I could pre-make a lot of rattles and in the final assembly. So in this case it's a 5-piece rattle. I'm making a bulb here that will not go through the test fixture, and it has a chamber here for the noisemaker. But in this case, with what I've chosen, you can insert the cap and glue it in. Let the glue harden if you'd like, and then what I chose for my noisy part is a couple of 1/4 inch ball bearings. Since this hole here is 3/8 of an inch, they can go in later, then the handle can go on, and then we can put the noisy stuff in the other side. Put it together, we now have a baby rattle. So let's test this baby rattle against the fixture. No matter how I insert it, whatever direction, it doesn't go through to the other side, so it passes. So let's make this 5-part baby rattle that I can burn on my laser for the inscription. I went to my computer's search engine and entered Woodturning, wood baby rattle. Here's the first result page. Let's review whether they pass the government rattle test. One that I see is a video I made a while ago with a Celtic knot. It passes. One end is a large bulb which does not even enter into the gauge. The other end is a disc. Between its thickness and the handle, it will not go through the test fixture. I worry about this one. I would want to test the handle end in the test fixture. It may go through, which is a fail. I worry more about this one. The handle end looks very small. Needs a test to be sure. These should pass. Please test this one. And I really worry about this one. Let's look at the second page. Most are looking okay, but I really worry about this one. Bring me the test fixture. Let's get to work. This is a small block of what looks like walnut. Although still square, it is mounted into deep chuck jaws while I quickly round it off and size it down somewhat. After cleaning off the top, I set up a Forstner bit to drill a 1-inch hole about 3/8 inch deep. Then swap the bit for a 3/4 inch bit to drill as deep as I dare to receive the noisy media, definitely less than halfway. Finally, cut a small tenon with a skew. I swap the wood end for end. With this tiny tenon, live center support is essential, at least while I cut off the corners. This time I cut a tenon first,
before drilling the same way as the other side. This could have been two separate pieces of wood, but this wood is barely long enough for both, and I do want a definite match. Finally, mark the middle for separating it into two blocks and the expected largest diameters for the bulbs before parting it in two. Next, I have a block of probably ash that will plug the noise cavity. I find the task of fitting a tenon to a mortise to be very fiddly, trial and error, and so easy to overshoot and make the tenon too small, which is the case this time. That is why I start the fitting with a short tenon before committing to the full length. It helps to cut a chamfer on the end to give a possible fit, but that is a lesson for another day. I want 1/8 to 1/4 inch longer than the mortise depth. Finally, drill a 3/8 inch hole and part it off. And do it all over again for the other bulb end. Now the walnut bulb end is mounted with a cone in the live center. The ash plug is held by friction only while I round over the two pieces together. Easy, then sand and apply a finish of beeswax and mineral oil. But we have two of these bulbs. This one goes about the same, except that friction is not quite enough to hold the ash plug. One thickness of paper towel does the trick. It holds the plug enough to shape, sand, and finish. But while that process was for two bulbs, it was only one side of each bulb. Using a smaller chuck with small jaws to fit into the noise cavity for an expansion hold, I temporarily lost my favorite plug for the live center. I substitute a threaded wood mount that I made about 20 years ago. Either way, I do not want to damage the walnut since I did not allow any extra length to absorb the typical damage from the live center. I do not care if my tool touches either the wood or rubber while I round off the bulb. They are expendable. Then sand and apply finish. But wait, there's one more bulb to do the same. Now for the handle that goes between the two bulbs. Unfortunately, there are two tenons that need to be cut exactly. This maple is mounted into a collet chuck. The first order business is to cut and fit a tenon to the 3/8 inch hole already drilled in the ash plug. This is the same cut, test, and fit process. One difference is that I do not want to test with the thin ash plug. Instead, I use a 3D printed size gauge until the final test. Once the tenon is right, although longer than needed, I start to shape the middle of the handle. This does not take long until I have to sand and finish this end of the handle. For the other end, I use a smaller 3/8 inch collet in the chuck. My tenon fits perfectly, by the way. Once the tenon is sized, finish turning the middle of the handle, sand and apply finish, blending with the former section. With that, the lathe work is finished. I need to shorten the handle tenons to not protrude into the noise cavity, but that is easy. The rattle pieces now pose for a selfie. From left to right, walnut bulb, ash plug, maple handle, ash plug, and walnut bulb. But wait, don't glue it all together yet. Over to the LED laser to engrave the handle. I made a fixture stand to hold the handle in position. Again, the reason for a separate handle is to be able to engrave the handle with this laser, which has a very short focal length. If either of the bulbs were on the handle, the engraving would be distorted and probably fuzzy. The assembly process can be in 2 stages. First, glue the plugs into the bulbs. Letting it dry now may prevent glue from interfering with the noisy function later. After the engraving process, first glue in the plugs if not done already. Then insert 1 or 2 1/4-inch ball bearings into the hole in the bulb. Then glue the tenons on each end of the rattle into the holes without excess glue. Et voila, all done. To review my test fixtures, this one is for small parts. Any piece must not fit entirely inside per the government specification. Of course, any part may be larger than this, just not smaller. However, Section 1510.4 specifies a separate test fixtures for baby rattles. The fit test is different in that any part of the rattle at whatever possible angle must not protrude through the fixture to the other side. Some turners simply use a much larger end than the code, which is legal, but remember that both ends must pass the test. Any possible angle that allows any portion to show on the other side fails. Shall I say it another way? Any baby rattle with a thin handle will likely fail. It must be tested. Did I say this enough that you get the point? By the way, calling it ornamental or display only does not work. No matter what you call it, if it looks like a baby rattle or sounds like a baby rattle, it must pass the test. Is that the duck test? By the way, one of you asked about my wire burner. I do not have plans. It's too simple. 2 triangular discs hold different sizes of guitar strings. It had a turned handle, a turned section to separate the discs, and an end. I need to replace one of my wires.